welcome one and all. It's kind of a cold fall day here in Crestone, Colorado. And we just wrapped up the Earthstock Summit and Festival, October 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th in Los Angeles, as a response to some of the devastation from the recent wildfires and also in support of a lot of the people there in the community. So it's easy to see without looking too far that a lot of accelerated change is happening on the planet, whether we're looking at the environment, natural disasters, we're looking at economics, what's happening financially, or if we're looking at what's happening with various governments, administrations, in the political arena. I mean, right now we're on day 14 of a government shutdown here in the US. And, you know, the idea of what we're going to present today is something that came together with myself and Kara, who will be talking in a minute, about how do we bring solutions and a clear vision for the future and start the practical implementation to really the world we want to live in and we want our children and our grandchildren to live in. So, very briefly, I'm Michael DiMartino from the Earthstock Enterprises and Foundation, also a co-founding member of Regeneration Global with Professor Alan Trotner, one of the co-founders of Earth Day, who's incubated over 400 nonprofits and organizations around green and sustainable solutions for people and planet. And I'm really happy to be here because recently, again, I got to meet our next presenter who really was a cornerstone in helping to midwife this idea of regenerate America, people, and the land. How do we, again, create the world that we want? And she's also the wife of Stephen, who just had a huge success in the global broadcast of the International Day of Peace with Vote for Peace, where millions of people around the world voted for peace. And of course, right now, there's been some progress with the peace movement in the Middle East regarding Israel and Palestine. And also at the same time, Generation Z is standing up against oligarchs and dictators all around the world, whether it's in Madagascar or Morocco or wherever it might be. There's a whole resurgence of people who think that, peace is still a good idea and that we should be focused on people and planet, not just the 1% who benefit with profit over people. So with that, I'd like to introduce Kara to share a little bit about who she is and what she does and why she's really been an essential cornerstone of this Regenerate America Blueprint 2030 project. And of course, bringing the voice of the powerful, empowered divine feminine, which has kind of been suppressed and oppressed over 100 years of colonialization here in America and really around the world. So this is the time we know that women should be standing up and letting their voices and their wisdom be heard. So welcome, Kara.
Thank you so much for having me. I look back on this journey of this planet and this country from the founding of this country where, there was a decision that we would break from the King of England. We would have independence. We would have our own country to run with democracy and voting and fairness. That there a lot of blood was shed for that. In fact, some of my ancestors fought in the Revolutionary War. So I feel that it's our duty at this time to stand up and say, the direction that we're going in right now is really not serving our country in terms of the contract that was originally created by our founders. We're going in a different direction, and it's not one that we as a whole have chosen to do. It's a select few that are choosing this, namely Project 2025 from the Heritage Foundation. And if we look at that closely, if you've had a chance to read it, it is online. It's available for anyone to see. So far, this administration has been successful in implementing almost half of the plans for Project 2025, including reducing the Environmental Protection Agency, social services, the list goes on. So what I had decided to do is to take some action I ran for office about 4 years ago here in Colorado for the state house for HD 44, it's called, in Parker area. It's a red area, a red district. I am admittedly a Democrat, and I did receive 42% of the vote, which I thought was outstanding. I really ran on the platform more of independence. And that's the place I really come from, is that we're here to just make the world a better place for everyone.
And I
So
love what, and
I decided,
I love what you just
go
said
ahead.
really quickly too about at the end of those politics and party. But one of the things when I met you, I really respect is you're really about policy. You're about making the changes, not necessarily blind allegiance to blue or to red or purple party, but you really stand on a platform of policy and change.
Yes, yes. And that's in many of my speeches, that's what I spoke about. And I felt like I maybe helped to move the needle on increasing teacher pay in Colorado, because we were able to successfully pass some bonds here in the community that did increase teacher pay. And a little bit helps. Everybody who participates can make a difference. So I'm a firm believer in that. And that's one of the reasons that, I started to formulate this idea of putting together a progressive plan to regenerate the United States in the direction that our founders were aiming towards and hoping that we would continue. And like Ben Franklin said, you have a democracy if you can keep it. We have to aim to keep it. That's our job. And
Absolutely.
so I am working with you, Michael, and all your fabulous ideas, how especially with indigenous people and regenerating the planet and ensuring places like the Palisades that had devastating fires that now just is chemically ridden dirt can be regenerated. We have to make these plans so people can stay healthy and not get cancer or any kind of things that could potentially happen from this. So far we have about 150 pages on this plan, and it basically covers each of the federal departments and federal agencies, including the White House, in terms of the direction that we should be going in, and so that can serve the greater good. So that's basically what's happening right now, actively involved in developing that and working with people and inviting more people to be involved in it. We really want more participation in this, of people who understand these different components of government and running government.
And I think one of the things that are really interesting, and again, I know, congratulations to you and the work that you're doing or have done politically and moving the needle forward. And earlier today, I sent you that Barbara Marx Hubbard image of full spectrum design, because part of the vision of how we can regenerate America is we have to look at all the different aspects of society and civilization, like, of course, ecology, health and wellness, the role of art, music, and culture and spirituality to elevate people. Also, the ideas of things like green technology, appropriate technology, having a green economy. And again, I know Professor Tratner, who's not on the call with us today, but will definitely be an advisor on this project, was very involved with the Biden administration with the CHIP Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, and really helping to move the needle forward as far as us being more green and more self-sustainable and not having such a negative impact on the planet and of course on people's health. That's one thing people don't think about. We tend to look at the environment as something outside of ourselves, like I'm going to go for a walk in nature, but really we have this symbiotic relationship. And then there's other things like governance, which in the indigenous models, they looked at the idea of watersheds or bioregionalism as opposed to, we live in a country now where everything is divided into states and counties and cities and municipalities. And even right now, as much as, again, I'm not really anti in some sense, but we see how broken the leadership is. And even doing the recent event in Santa Monica, celebrating their 150-year anniversary of the founding of Santa Monica, that a lot of leadership is broken. And the thing is, they're doing their part, but they don't necessarily have solutions. And that's really what we're going to talk about today is
Mhm.
practical solutions for people and planet. But we also look at things like you said, education, the role of peace and justice, which also plays a lot into this understanding of sovereignty, starting with spiritual sovereignty, but us as sovereign beings. And then things like infrastructure, media, communications, but all these pieces have to synchronize and work together, which is what we've been working on with Regeneration Global, and literally have just launched this global platform for solutionaries, consultants, contractors, and products. But most immediately, even talking to people in Europe right now, what's happening here in the United States, which again was born out of the vision of what you were speaking about, a place of true democracy and escaping tyranny. Unfortunately, when we came here, the perspective of indigenous people was um, kind of uh, poisonous in a way, because we thought we had to basically colonize them. There was a huge genocide that happened, and we had to bring our religions and truths and beliefs to the people who had been here in North America, consciously stewarding the land for thousands of years. And if you think about the devastation that we've done here in 200 years, so I'm not saying that we should go back to living in teepees and stone huts. I'm just saying that there's a lot of uh, very important knowledge in this traditional and indigenous wisdom that can still be utilized about, even wildfire mitigation through prescribed burns, and how to keep water clean and remediation and all these types of things. But somehow over the last few hundred years, and especially accelerated recently, we've kind of really have deviated, and it's being recognized all around the world of America, which was this vision of Turtle Island and the eagle and the symbol of vision of freedom and oversight, has gotten co-opted. So part of our challenge with this Regenerate America is allowing the old paradigm to fall away, whether through natural disaster or whatever that might be, so that we can truly regenerate and use that as compost to actually really create the future that we all want to live in. And I call that more social permaculture. But before we dive into the
Yeah, and it's going
actual,
to take collaboration from a number of different organizations and people, I think, to really hone in on this. But we already have, 150 pages spelled out details of what can happen and next steps and everything.
so people know, just can you give us a little bit about your background? I know you wrote a book on soul contracts, which can sound a little bit esoteric, but it's something that's very real.
Mhm.
And how you
Okay.
kind of got to this point before we dive into the actual blueprint, 2030 Regenerate America.
Sure, yeah. So many years ago, I did a little research on relationships and understanding, your purpose in life kind of thing. When you're younger, you're trying to figure it out and understand. And so I found a little bit about contracts, that we all actually have inherent conscious and subconscious contracts and agreements that we have agreed to throughout our whole life, and primarily that we accepted during childhood based on comments from parents, from teachers, from different people more of authority, in terms of how we live our lives, what we accept for money, in terms of our relationship to money, our relationships with people, our careers and things. So, and really the key in life I found was to uncover what is that contract that we have that may be keeping us from having full success. And so I did a lot of research on this. I developed a process for people to better understand what their contracts are and then to write their new contract. And it's much like a legal document where you say, I, with your name, do hereby, release all previous conscious and non-conscious contracts and agreements with regards to, let's say, relationships, and hereby create a new contract. And then, you create paragraphs to say, I am co-creative with my process, and I'm happy in what I'm doing in my life. And you just add in everything in the now moment, so that the universe, if you would call it, can respond, right? And so it becomes a reality. So you're actually creating your reality. So I'm a big firm believer in that. I've worked with hundreds of people and helped them shift their lives to, something that's more harmonious for them. That's they let go of the old patterns that no longer serve them. and adopt new ones, and they have new relationships, they make more money. It's been really lovely to watch and see all the changes that for the good that people go through. So in fact, the blueprint that I've been working on with people, with yourself, is the similar idea. Is if we create our reality, we have to write it down. It's still the power of the pen. Like, the power of the pen still exists. If you write it into existence, you are calling it into existence. And so there you go. There's the pen. I mean, you can still type it out on your computer, but essentially, you're putting your thoughts into the ethers,
Well, it's
and
interesting
you're
because
putting your intentions out there. And
well,
you're
it's
just saying, hey, this is what I believe in, this is what I stand for, and these are my boundaries. Like, this is what I'll accept and not accept, and this is what I'm calling into my life. It's the same goes for this country. I think we can apply the same concepts.
well, it's interesting because what you're saying, maybe just some could sound esoteric, but really it's the foundational piece of quantum physics, right? What we feel, what we say, what we do, our actions create the next moment. So there is a sense of instead of people just complaining or rolling over and going back to sleep or putting their head in the sand, it's like this is the time of radical self responsibility. And that ties into the whole idea of our sovereignty. But like you said, we
Mhm.
have to move from uh, most of us were raised here in the United States. It's an incredible melting pot. Like I say, the phoenix will rise from the
Yeah.
ashes. But part of it is that, we have to move from this culture of commercialism. I mean, my partner's from Bulgaria, and when we drive around, she goes, everywhere here, there's a sign trying to sell you something. Be more beautiful, be more successful, do this, do that. It's like everything here is so based on consumerism and hyper capitalism that it doesn't allow space for people to realize you're not just a commodity, that you actually are a human being. And
Yeah.
and through our actions we create our reality. So i think
Right. I
i
mean, you
think
know what? Laws that are put into place by legislatures are contracts, right? I mean,
yeah.
there are some states, like in Alaska, I believe, they don't allow for billboards. There's some states that say, hey, this is not who we are. We are about our state and the beauty of our state. So they just keep that, away from their core belief. Um, it's the same thing, I guess, contracts and law.
Amazing. So as we move from this culture of hyper capitalism, 200-year-old country, and very much a very patriarchal, dominant, militaristic mindset, and we move from this older paradigm into this new paradigm of and this is what a lot of indigenous people say, more the feminine, more the maternal, more the caring, more the nurturing, more the intuitive, more the receptive.
Mhm.
And as we make this change from competition to collaboration, let's start to dig a little bit into um, Regenerate America Blueprint 2030 and maybe some of the substance that's there. And I will say for people watching this, this is literally being created as Karen and I are talking over the last few months. Even the logo uh, even came to us this morning before doing this. So this is
Yeah.
fluid and
Although
in
you'll need to
process.
share your screen. You'll need to share the screen because I can't share.
Okay. All right. I can share the screen with you here. And basically what we'll do is we'll just give people a little bit of an idea. There you go, of what's inside Project 2030 and into Blueprint 2030. And I think what's interesting, when we first talked, we're looking at things like UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous People. We're looking at
Mhm.
the Sustainable Development Goals, which were forged at the Earth Summit that I was at in Brazil in 1992, when all the world
Mhm.
agreed on Sustainable Development Goals. Although I will say there are some lesser known, more nefarious parts of that. And we're also looking at things like the Declaration of Human Rights and other things. Like, we're not trying to recreate a wheel, we're trying to
Yeah, the
weave
United Nations
together.
has spelled this out already, huh?
Yeah. So, and we're just trying to weave together, look at these documents, and again, regenerate, take what's valuable, what's pertinent right now, and how we can move
Yeah,
forward. So, you should be able to share your
exactly.
screen. You should be able to share your screen now.
Oh, I can share now? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can you see it?
Yep.
Great. Yeah. So here's the logo. I think it says a lot right there. We're talking about, maintaining even our farms. Look, right now we've got a lot of farmers that are losing their land. They can't sell their crops. They're not getting the funding from the government, and because of the tariffs now, China's not buying the corn, the beef, so there's a real issue right now. We really need to turn that boat around. So that is actually included in this blueprint. So this is under the auspices of Right to Stand Hybrid PAC, a think tank, and we're going to just kind of move forward with the PAC being the umbrella. And there's a really comprehensive outline here that you can see. We're dedicating this to future generations, communities of today, the dreamers and builders, and our military and government leadership. And
Amazing.
so
And
it
just
is a living draft that we're going to be continuously working on and updating. At some point, we'll be finalizing it so that it can be fully implemented. Um, and
and
then it's,
just to touch really briefly, a
yeah.
big part of the Regenerate America is about regenerating soil, regenerating water. I spoke recently to Ryland, who just did the film Kiss the Ground, um, and has had huge success in educating people about, even if it's in our own backyard, that we all have been victims of the petrochemical industry and our soil has been depleted. I mean, just drive from Sacramento to Los Angeles through Central Valley, which used to be a lush inland wetlands paradise with wildlife, and now it's basically a salt and desert. So the idea is, like you were saying, uh, very practical things like food security, water safety, and how we can actually regenerate the soil. And we can all do things, even in our own backyard, to help
Mhm.
regenerate the America.
Right, exactly. So here you have the table of contents. It is similar to Project 2025 in the layout, because, well, we really need to look at each of these departments because they do oversee different aspects of our lives in this country, and they control, the policies and the funding and all sorts of things. So you can see that the beginning, the first part is really important to talk about the debt, the federal debt, which is at $33 trillion. So we really need to tackle that. I know this administration right now is looking at tackling that, but they're doing it in a way that is really cutting a lot of staff and layoffs. And now we've got this, mass layoff coming off that nobody knows what's happening. I mean, the Center for Disease Control apparently fired a whole bunch of people, and then the next day they rehired more than half of them. So it's very unorganized and haphazard, I'm finding. So we really need to do this in an organized fashion. We know like who needs to be there, if there's too much fat in the federal government, where we need to make changes, but we can't just do this in an overnight process.
Right. And we can't just give Doge a chainsaw and say, have at it. This has to be very surgical and methodological.
Yes, exactly. I mean, there's so many government employees, and I have friends actually working in the government. They don't know day to day what's going to happen. In fact, my friend who works for the Department of Labor, he got his last check and it was a third of what he's supposed to have. And then now he hasn't been paid. So, and he doesn't know if he'll be laid off because there's no organization, there's no communication in this. So, anyway, I think that that's the boat we need to turn around: is better organization, better communication, and then also obviously audits, of federal programs, but organized audits, right? And then examining even, the defense spending. Yes, we need our military, but we're almost at $1 trillion for our budget, which is more than the next 7 countries combined military spending. It's massive spending. And so we also have to look at the procurement process. I mean, there's all sorts of things that we can look at where there's too much spending, like procurement. I know firsthand because we had a tech company and we had to go through a middle company in order to sell to the government. And that middle company marked up our product 3 times the value of what we set it at and charged the US government that price. So they got all the extra money from that. But what I'm saying is the budget we need to look at where's this money being spent and how much is being marked up?
Yeah, fiscal
So
responsibility.
it, yeah,
Again,
that has to be number one. Like we can't even survive in this country unless we have our house in order.
yeah.
They tell people who kids when they're younger, like you got to make sure you have a balanced budget, balance your money, what you're spending, you don't want to go into debt, all these things. But our country is too far in debt. It's irresponsible.
Yeah, especially when we can't even support people with practical health care in the wealthiest country in the world. But meanwhile, we're bleeding out trillions of dollars for military, industrial complex, and expansion of
I'm
global.
sorry. Well, we gave $20 billion to Argentina to help them.
Yeah.
Did the people approve this? I didn't have a vote on it. you know, we
Yeah.
need it for our children. We need it for for our land, for our social services, for our food, for the moms, who take care of the children that can't afford it, the SNAP programs.
So looking
Anyway,
at this, looking at this, what are some of the other documents or things that we've been looking at in the formulation of this? Again, I want people to know, and again, you have an incredible background in politics and understandings about this in many areas as myself, about things like regenerative agriculture and in media. And then we're building a strategic alliance of people to help advise this and implement this. But what are some of the other key documents? For instance, I know when we first talked, we talked about the Great Law of Peace from the Six Nation, the Iroquois Nation, which actually is what was used to form the Constitution by the founding fathers. And it mapped out um, literally an indigenous based form of democracy. Unfortunately, they took women out of it and it became more centralized power. But, that Great Law of
yeah,
Peace.
exactly. The product seventh generation. That came from the concept of the Iroquois Nation that says we need to do things so that seven generations ahead of us will survive, they'll thrive, they'll have prosperity and a good life. So that's probably what they also took from the Iroquois, I believe, the founding fathers.
Yeah, a lot of things were appropriated and then kind of manipulated and misused. But so we can see this thread that goes between indigenous cultures, that goes between governments, that goes between United Nations charters. I know we talked with Alan earlier today. That was part of the original 1972 environmental summit in Stockholm, where leaders from around the world all agreed on principles. But somehow a lot of this just not has been deployed, and part of it is that people are just not educated to know that, again, we're not creating a wheel. Maybe, yeah, we do have to compost some of these things that don't work anymore, but we have a lot of great building blocks that we can use in this process of Regenerate America Blueprint 2030, and also
Mhm.
our collaboration with Regeneration Global, which is working with people in Brazil about ecological conservation and jungle aid, jungle conservation, but also looking at water cleanup from microplastics and all these different things, food security in Africa. So, there's only so much we can do, but the idea is that we're aggregating this huge resource directory of what we call solutionaries and luminaries in ecology and health. And with facilitation, we can get a lot done.
Mhm. Definitely. And there's all different bodies that we can pull from, different organizations, nonprofits, people who have worked in government, they can help out. I think it's going to take a number of us to come together on this. I think we have a template already that we're working off of. And so I'd like to make sure that we have people who are interested to contact you, I believe, or myself, and we can kind of get the momentum going even more.
Yeah, and I will say this is a labor of love for us, and there are some other things, but we will at the end of the video, we'll put up our contact information when I put like the intro and the bumpers together for the final post production. But yeah,
Mhm.
this is a call to action, and again, we're not, like Buckminster Fuller said, don't fight against the old paradigm, just create a new one. So I want to emphasize that we're not here trying to incite about people being against this or against that. Of course, there are things that we don't agree with, but we have to create solutions, not just complain about it, and certainly not, um, to fight or to incur any sort of violence or conflict in the process. So this is very much,
Right.
like Gandhi spoke about and Martin Luther King. This is completely passive, nonviolent, solution-based resistance to some of the stuff that we see happening
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. I mean, we can be angry, we can be upset, but we have to just take action, like you said, in a nonviolent way, but stating what it is we choose. Like that, I think is really important, is that we have to choose it, not just say, I want it, this is what we have to say, this is what our path is and where we will be.
And everybody has to do their part. We can't leave it up to someone else anymore.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. And so I'm just scrolling through this so that, you know, when you're watching this video, that you could just kind of see the bits of it that have been put together. There's is been a lot that's already been flushed out here. And here's the Department of Labor. So my friend who works there, they're having all sorts of cuts, so we want to make sure that we also have a record of what it is that needs to be implemented that is currently being cut.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of science is being dropped.
Yeah.
A lot of archives and records and stuff that,
Hmm.
again, provide a lot of important information. So,
Hmm. Yeah, and here's my favorite Department of Education. So, the strength of the schooling and the education in this country reflects the strength of us as a country as a whole.
well, it's interesting. A
We
friend of mine was just in this Silicon Valley, and there's a couple of huge campuses there, and they said literally the majority of all the students are from China and India right now. So there is something about education in our country and being available to citizens here that are getting beaten out by people from Asia that are much more driven and tend to have more of a different type of work ethic here too, which is interesting because we're even seeing like impact
Mhm.
from AI on, the education system, how it's kind of in a way helping students for research, but it's also dumbing them down because they're letting AI do all the process for them. And also, I
Mhm.
recently attended a few AI summits, and I asked people, based on the amount of water that's needed for these big quantum computing centers, and they have to locate them at these optimal watersheds, and the
Mhm.
ecological impact, and then also the emissions and the power draw. I said, is there any legislation being done to kind of keep AI manageable in a way that it can be a tool, but it doesn't basically create a dystopia, an ecological dystopia, and damage, which is interesting because I just saw Tron the other night, which brings up some of those questions right now about technology's role. How do we use it as a tool and not allow it to dominate us or even, again, create a dystopian narrative?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we've covered a lot here, huh?
Absolutely, and I think as we evolve, we're looking like for the Department of Agriculture. Again, I know people that recently went to DC and did a whole regenerative ag event and tried to push legislation for regenerative agriculture. So, again, a very
Mhm.
dynamic time, but it is going to take some advisors and experts in these different areas to help advise and to really not only just design and engineer this out, but to really help implement it. So, again, this is a definite
Mhm.
call to action for people to be involved. To these are your areas of expertise and
Mhm.
experience.
Yeah, yeah, there's a whole section here flushed out for farmers and agriculture. That's just, it's the basis of our food supply. We want to make sure, that we as a country can feed ourselves.
Well, well,
And with having crop diversification and modern farm infrastructure supporting the small farmers, who have been doing this for generations or new to it, they are working hard to make sure that they provide food for this country.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think what would be interesting as this document evolves, having a section like what can you do? Like what could you do in your own house, your own backyard, your own neighborhood? Because part of regenerating America is we have to stop
Mm,
using toxic household cleansers and products that destroy the watershed and the environment and also make our families sick. So, again, all of
mm,
this is not political. It's just basically, even if we're looking at our own selfish self interest of our own health and quality of life,
mhm.
how to stop using household cleaners that are detrimental to us. How do we do things like not use things in the yard, landscaping materials, things like Roundup, and that have again impact on the land, the soil, and the water, and also our health. And what's interesting is, I just talked
Yeah,
with
that's a great point for sure.
a colleague of mine, Rachel Linden. She's right, actually working on a Clean Soil Act, very much like the
Mhm,
Clean Water Act or the Clean Air Act, because we don't think
mhm.
about soil, which is really the whole basic foundational building block of agriculture and nutrition and life. And what she said is, um, guess what the largest agricultural product in the North America is?
Soy?
Lawns.
Oh, lawns. Okay.
Lawns and golf courses, schools,
Yeah.
parks, city municipalities. So she was working on a whole organic land care policy, because if we don't, you don't really think about it, but the amount of toxins that are being used on
Mhm.
these ecosystems is horrific. And again, contaminating water, making people sick. And also the big thing is it's killing pollinators, and pollinators are needed to pollinate plants
Yeah.
to create food. So it's just a whole domino effect. So again, I think part of this a document that we could talk about, and this blueprint is like, we have to give people, what can you do? Maybe you're not a solutionary at a bioregional level. Maybe you don't have the time and
Mhm.
bandwidth. Maybe you're just struggling to stay afloat. But if everybody in their own personal life takes some responsibility to implement solutions and to become a regenerator, then all the it's like it takes many drops of water to make an ocean. So I think we
Yeah.
should definitely have part of this is educating and coaching people to be more green, more sustainable, and really more have a better quality of life, how to be healthier.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we can certainly add a whole section on that, how the individual can participate and make a difference.
Maybe like make America healthy again or something.
No, I want to
I'm
stay
kidding.
away from, that's their
I'm
own,
kidding. Well, that's the
yeah,
thing,
acronym.
what's interesting, there is a lot of good ideas floating around, but I think, basically they're only as good as the people who are taking those roles of authority and leadership to implement them. And as we know, this is a high level blueprint, but it's also a grassroots movement. We're not trying to recreate
Mhm.
some sort of hierarchy or oligarchy or dictatorship to regiment.
No, I mean, we are at a critical point right now. Actually, here's the Department of Health and Human Services, where funding is being severely cut. So hospitals here in Colorado and across the country are having to close because they're not getting their funding. It's been cut off. So now we have the rural part of the United States particularly being affected, where they're going to have to drive, at least an hour to get to a hospital. And if they have an emergency like a stroke or a heart attack, lives will be at risk for sure.
Yeah, and the defunding of FEMA, all these things. So it's really about people rolling up their sleeves and taking radical self responsibility for themselves, their neighborhood, their
Hmm.
community. And yeah,
Hmm.
exactly like you said. And it's interesting because, I lived in California for a while. I lived on the East Coast, which are typically considered blue states. And, what's interesting is this whole divisiveness. When you actually look at the
Hmm.
tax base of what helps fuel the economy of the United States, really like the West Coast and the East Coast are huge economic drivers that are considered blue states. And a lot of the
Yeah.
people that are supporting the current administration in red states, and I don't want to get political about it, are some of the people that are going to be hit the most. I mean, California is actually talking about possibly seceding and being able to be really self-sustainable on its own. And we've all heard about like the state of Jefferson and all these
Yeah.
different.
I mean, yeah, Governor Newsom made an announcement that the state of California actually sends a surplus amount to the federal government.
Yep. So
Whereas
it's time
states
that we
like
all
you
work
said,
together.
like Texas has a negative, output. They're not able to send as much to the federal government. So the surplus that they're sending gets covered for Texas to have all the services that they need.
Well, it's time that we want to be the United States of America, not the divided snakes of America. And
Okay.
we all have to we have to find common ground. We have to come together as a humanity, and it's all about
Hmm.
solutions. It's about policy and solutions, not about party. I mean, blind
Hmm.
blind devotion and worship of any party or any hierarchy or uh, figure always leads to, again, divisiveness and usually someone having too much. That's why we had the No Kings rallies, right? We get into authoritarianism. But anyways, so this
Yeah.
is really exciting. I'm glad we had some time today. Any closing thoughts as we scroll through? And I would love to see that amazing logo that was birthed the midwife this morning. And
Oops.
but any last thoughts before we conclude this kind of introduction to people about what we've been working on with the um, Blueprint, Regenerate America Blueprint 2030? And we say 2030 because what we're doing it now, but we're trying to build up to a critical mass, correct?
Um, well, we're trying to build up to a place where we have a finalized plan, actually.
Yep.
So that's the key, is something that we can then share with different candidates, let's say, that are running for office, or those that are in office, organizations. We need to actually communicate and spread this out, that there is a plan, that there are people working on this. We see positivity in the world, like we can overcome, we can create a great country. We just have to flush out what it is as a collective that we want, that we're choosing.
Use it as compost. So, real briefly, I know when we first talked about this, you went to some sort of political event, right? And you would ask someone, can you share a little bit that story where you asked someone if there was like a blueprint and
Oh
what kind?
yeah. Yes, I went to Senator Bennett's, and he's a U.S. senator, and from Colorado, in fact. And I asked, just, is there a plan? Do we have some kind of blueprint that we can all work towards, like a business plan? And he said he didn't know of one. He said he had heard some mayors were talking about it, but there hadn't been a formalized group put together that he knew of. And so I asked around. I asked some other people in political offices, did they know of a plan? And so they didn't know of one either. So that's why this was birthed, is because there's just that void that needed to be filled.
And it's about people and planet, and it's about all of us being involved in co-creating and collaborating the future we want. And even though it's Blueprint
Hmm.
2030, we're not waiting until then to do stuff. We already have stuff happening. And
Right.
again, we're going to reach out and call action. At the end of the video will be some contact information. But again, thank you so much, Kara, for your time and your amazing work and dedication, from soul contracts to Blueprint 2030 and this incredible
Political
strategic alliance.
contracts. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, tell
You're
Stephen
welcome. Yeah.
hello.
Thank you for inviting me.
And I love your photo of that's Garden of the Gods up there, right?
Yes, I took that actually from the visitor center one day. You can see.
Beautiful. Beautiful. All right. Very nice. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for your time. And we'll probably do as things develop, we'll probably do an update here in the next month or two. But again, thank you for the granular things that you're doing to help bring this all together.
Mhm. Welcome.
Great. All right, maybe we can end with the logo, and we'll just have a moment of quiet.
Yes, I'm
We
just
all
trying
can
to get to it.
dream of a brighter future um,
Yes.
for people and the planet. So
Hmm. It's coming up here. There it is.
fantastic. Let's just take a moment of quiet. We'll all dream into that, of the potential for health and wellness and quality of life and healthy soil, clean water, green technology,
Hmm.
being able for humanity to truly embody its potential. Okay, thank you for joining another episode of Solutionaries here on Regen Media TV.